Welcome to the deep dive. I am just so thrilled you're here today.
Absolutely. It is great to be here.
Because if you are anything like me, you are constantly trying to make sense of the world. Constantly trying to figure out how we are supposed to navigate the really heavy, complicated, and often just overwhelming parts of life.
Right. And there is certainly no shortage of overwhelming things to navigate right now.
Exactly. Well, grab a seat because I have just devoured an absolutely fascinating stack of reading, and I cannot wait to share it with you.
It is a massive stack of reading this time, too.
It really is.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to take a deep dive into how vastly different modern organizations are tackling some of the biggest crises of our time. We're talking about the crisis of the family, the crisis of fatherhood, and the crisis of mental health.
And we are looking at some incredibly different approaches to these issues.
Vastly different. I mean, we are looking at blueprints that are practically operating in alternate universes. On one side of the table, we have clinical and scientific sources.
Medical side.
Right. We are looking at this dense, really fascinating data from neurolaunch.com and the Fatherhood Project. And the Fatherhood Project actually operates out of the Massachusetts General Hospital.
So highly clinical.
Highly clinical. But then on the exact opposite side of the table, we have a stack of faith-based and ministry sources. We're talking materials from Focus on the Family, Promise Keepers, Uncommon, and this highly unique group called Dwell Differently.
Before we really get into the weeds here, I need to establish a vital ground rule for you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important.
It is, because as we go through this material, you are going to hear some politically charged concepts that span the entire cultural spectrum.
From all sides.
Right. From right-wing perspectives, you'll hear about campaigns like Make Dads Great Again, and arguments attempting to reframe the well-known slogan, My Body, My Choice. And from other sources, you'll hear distinctly medical, purely secular viewpoints on human behavior.
Completely secular.
So it is crucial to explicitly state right up front that neither of us is taking a side here. We are not endorsing and we are not condemning any of these viewpoints.
Not at all.
Our sole goal in this deep dive is to impartially report and analyze these ideas exactly as they are presented in the source material. We want to help you understand the landscape of how these different organizations are communicating with millions of people purely as an objective exploration.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the very first thread that weaves through almost all of these sources is a recognized, urgent crisis in fatherhood and manhood.
It's the common denominator across the board.
It is. Regardless of their ideology, these organizations are looking at absent dads, broken homes, addiction, and just a general culture of confusion. And they're throwing up their hands saying, we have a massive societal problem.
But the ways they are trying to fix it are night and day.
Night and day. I want to start with the faith-based blueprint. I was reading through the materials from Promise Keepers, and they have launched a highly aggressive new campaign led by their chairman and CEO, Shane Winnings.
They are definitely not mincing words with this campaign.
Not whatsoever. They were using highly specific, culturally resonant slogans like, Make Dads Great Again, and America Needs Godly Men.
And they're taking this directly to younger demographics, too.
Yeah, they are rolling out a massive college campus tour right now called the Wake Up Call to reach younger men. The sources actually noted an upcoming stop specifically for Yakima, Washington. They're explicitly framing this as a critical moment for men to rise up and step into godly leadership.
And what stands out in the source stack is that Promise Keepers isn't the only ministry taking this assertive approach, though the methodologies do vary.
Right, there's a huge spectrum even within the faith-based side.
Exactly. Your sources also included Uncommon, which is a ministry specifically focused on this concept of biblical manhood. But they operate a bit differently than the stadium tours.
How so?
They use a modern subscription model. You can join for $9 a month or $49 a year. What is really striking about Uncommon is how granular and intensely practical they get with their content.
They have the app features and podcasts, right?
Yes, they offer a feature called Devo Plus and a podcast called Man to Man. Rather than just talking in broad theological strokes about leadership, they are tackling hyper-specific modern men's issues. For instance, they have modules and articles on things like roommate syndrome in marriage and healing from church hurt.
I am so glad you brought up roommate syndrome because that jumped out at me immediately when I was reading.
It's a very real phenomenon.
It is. For anyone listening who hasn't heard that term, it is that terrifying drift in a marriage where you stop being romantic partners and essentially become two people just managing a household together.
You're just dividing chores.
Dividing chores, passing each other in the kitchen, living parallel lives. Uncommon is building a framework of brotherhood in Scripture to address that very modern, very daily pressure. It is a highly spiritual, highly communal blueprint for fixing the modern man.
Precisely. Now hold that image in your mind. The stadium revivals, the brotherhood, the scripture-based advice for marriage. Hold that and flip the stack of sources over.
Okay, flipping over to the medical side.
This brings us to the clinical blueprint. This brings us to the Fatherhood Project. Now, this is a nonprofit organization, but it operates directly out of the Department of Psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital.
So the environment instantly changes.
Instantly. It changes from a stadium revival to a sterile medical institution. The Fatherhood Project is utilizing a secular, evidence-based medical approach. While Promise Keepers relies on spiritual intervention, the Fatherhood Project leans entirely on clinical intervention.
And they have specific programs for this.
They do. A prime example of this in the source material is their Parents in Recovery program.
Right, and the context for this program is just staggering. The text notes that over 10 million Americans over the age of 12 misuse opioids in 2018.
10 million.
It is an absolute tidal wave of addiction that is fracturing families. So how does a psychiatric department try to fix a father in the middle of that crisis?
Their response is to use a group-based parenting skills program to enhance emotional engagement.
So they are teaching them how to be present.
Exactly. Their data shows that actively teaching fathers and mothers in recovery how to properly engage with their children actually helps prevent relapse. They teach them how to regulate their own emotions so they can co-regulate a toddler's emotions, for instance.
That is fascinating.
They are treating the family dynamic as a clinical tool for sobriety.
And to make that even more accessible, there's a detail I found incredibly memorable in the source. The Fatherhood Project actually teamed up with the National Basketball Association.
The NBA.
Yes, specifically the NBA Players Association Foundation. Together, they created the Massachusetts Resource Guide for Fathers.
That's a huge partnership.
It really is. They are recognizing that dads are increasingly on the front lines of childcare, and instead of just telling them to step up, they're handing them a tangible, clinically vetted resource guide to actually do the job.
What's fascinating here is how both sides of the aisle are fundamentally agreeing on the root of the problem.
They both see the same fire burning.
Yes. Both the clinical organizations and the faith-based organizations see men, and specifically engaged fathers, as the critical linchpin to fixing societal breakdown. But their methodologies are a complete divergence.
Totally opposite ends of the spectrum.
One uses the language of brotherhood, revival, and scripture to compel a man to change from the inside out. The other uses group-based psychiatric parenting skills and evidence-based clinical guides to prevent relapse. They are looking at the exact same societal wound, but applying completely different medicine.
It is a fascinating divide, and it actually bleeds right into the next major concept in our sources. Because it's not just fatherhood where we see this massive split.
Where else does it show up?
It is how these organizations view the human brain. It's how they view anxiety and how they define mental health as a whole. I want to pivot to the neuroscience perspective first.
Okay, let's look at that.
I was looking through neurolaunch.com, and the sheer volume of brain science data they have compiled is staggering. They are taking a deeply biological, deeply mechanical view of human behavior.
Very analytical.
Very. For example, they offer a $49 NeuroPassport. It is a 45-minute, evidence-based autism screening tool.
Which is incredibly telling about where our society is right now.
How do you mean?
Well, the fact that a platform is offering a highly accessible 45-minute, $49 autism screening speaks to a massive demand. There are adults who have spent their entire lives feeling out of sync and who are now actively seeking a clinical biological explanation for their struggles rather than a moral or spiritual one.
That makes so much sense. And what really hooked me on Neurolaunch were their articles breaking down everyday stress into raw neuroscience.
They get very specific, don't they?
Oh, they do. They have an article on mom rage, which I think is going to be intensely relatable to so many people listening to you and me right now.
It's a very common experience.
It is. They describe that hidden anger of mothers that exists right behind those perfectly curated Instagram posts. We are talking about the white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel after bedtime takes 3 exhausting hours, or locking the bathroom door for just 5 minutes of silence before the frustration completely spills over.
And how do they frame that?
Well, Neurolaunch doesn't judge this at all. They explain it entirely through biology. They have another piece on amygdala anger.
Ah, the amygdala.
Yes. They describe that split second when someone cuts you off in traffic. Your vision narrows, your heart pounds, and you are flooded with absolute rage before you can even consciously form a thought.
And we really need to pause on the mechanics of that because understanding the biology changes how you view yourself.
Right.
Neurolaunch explains that this is your brain's alarm system, the amygdala, literally hijacking your conscious thought. From an evolutionary standpoint, your amygdala acts as a smoke detector.
So it's looking for threats.
Exactly. When it senses a threat, like a car swerving into your lane, it doesn't wait for your logical prefrontal cortex to assess the situation. It instantly floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline.
It just bypasses logic completely.
Completely. It is a purely mechanical view of emotion. The brain is an organ, the amygdala is an alarm, and the emotion of rage is an involuntary chemical response designed to keep you alive.
Which completely removes the guilt, right? If it's just plumbing and chemicals, it is not a character flaw.
That's the argument, yes.
But they also highlighted some really unusual psychological conditions that I need you to explain, because they mentioned something called fixed affect.
Fixed affect.
Yes, the source describes it as a phenomenon where a person's face remains totally unchanged, completely blank, whether they are hearing tragic news or celebrating a major promotion.
Wait, so is their face completely blank because they are consciously masking their emotions, or is something else happening?
It is definitely not a conscious masking or an attempt to hide their feelings. In cases of fixed affect, it is a neurological disconnect. A disconnect between what?
Between the internal feeling and the external expression. The person might be experiencing profound joy or deep sorrow internally, but the brain is literally failing to send the corresponding signals to the facial muscles to express that emotion outward.
Wow.
It proves this mechanical view of the brain that Neurolaunch is building their entire platform on. They're creating a library to help people understand their stress and their mental health as biological, neurological realities.
Okay, so that is the biological framework. But then we look back at Focus on the Family, and we get a perspective on mental health that is entirely different.
A complete 180-degree turn.
Exactly. We are talking about their spiritual warfare perspective. There's a specific broadcast highlighted in the sources featuring Jason and Tori Benham.
And they tackle anxiety directly.
They do. They are talking about anxiety, but they absolutely do not define anxiety as a chemical imbalance, and they certainly do not call it an amygdala hijack. They define anxiety as projected powerlessness and explicitly as spiritual warfare.
This is a profound pivot, and it completely changes the locus of control. The Benhams outline a highly structured, three-part strategy to combat this anxiety.
The 3 steps. Let's walk through those.
Step 1 is to recognize the source of the anxiety, which they argue is often spiritual deception rather than just stress. Step 2 is to renounce the lies you're being tempted to believe. And step 3 is to replace those lies with God's truth.
Recognize, renounce, replace.
Exactly. If we look closely at this, we see that it fundamentally shifts the battlefield from the physical body to the spiritual realm.
It really does. It treats the human mind as a contested space. But how does that actually play out for someone struggling in their day-to-day life?
The reason this matters to you, the listener, as you navigate your own life, is that the framework you choose completely alters your treatment plan.
Give me an example.
Let's go back to that traffic scenario. If you view your overwhelming stress and rage as a physiological event caused by a misfiring amygdala, as Neurolaunch suggests, your treatment plan is going to involve evidence-based emotional regulation techniques.
Like deep breathing.
Right. You might seek out clinical therapy, practice deep breathing to lower your heart rate, or perhaps take medication to calm the central nervous system. You are treating the hardware of the brain.
Treating the hardware. I like that.
But if you view that exact same overwhelming stress as a symptom of projected powerlessness or a spiritual battle, as Focus on the Family suggests, your treatment plan involves prayer.
It's totally different.
It involves actively recognizing spiritual lies and replacing them with biblical truth. You are treating the software of the soul.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because these organizations aren't just publishing white papers or broadcasting sermons and hoping adults figure it out.
No, they are much more proactive than that.
They are actively, aggressively trying to shape the culture of the next generation. They want to embed these very specific values into daily family life through media, merchandise, and constant engagement.
It's an ecosystem approach.
Exactly. Let's look at the sheer scale of Focus on the Family's media push. Right now, they are funding the first ever animated feature film for their incredibly popular Adventures in Odyssey series.
That's a massive undertaking.
It's huge. The movie is called Journey into the Impossible, and they're driving this through a massive $1 million match campaign. They are attempting to bring a gospel-centered story to theaters nationwide to compete with mainstream entertainment.
They are indeed, and it speaks to their strategy of creating a comprehensive, immersive ecosystem for a family to live within. They don't just want to provide a Sunday lesson, they want to provide the entertainment, the marriage counseling, and the parenting strategies.
They want to be the default resource.
Precisely. For instance, their resources include an article listing 100 questions to ask your fiancé before tying the knot. It covers everything from gender roles to finances to parenthood, ensuring couples are aligned on this specific worldview before marriage.
Getting ahead of the issues.
Yes. They also have extensive materials defending biblical discipline as a loving, intentional process rooted in God's character to guide children towards spiritual growth. And, keeping our strict neutrality in mind as we report this, they also produce content aimed at directly challenging and flipping major cultural narratives.
Right. Our ground rule applies here. We are just reporting what's in the text.
Exactly. For example, they have an article arguing that the phrase, "my body, my choice," is actually pro-life. They are providing an all-encompassing lens through which a family can view the entire modern world.
And speaking of an immersive, all-encompassing lens, we have to talk about tactile memorization. I was completely blown away by this ministry called Dwell Differently.
They have a very unique approach.
They really do. They have a totally unique approach to keeping family faith front and center, and it involves temporary tattoos.
Temporary tattoos for scripture memory.
Yes. They create these beautiful modern designs to help people literally memorize scripture by wearing it. The surprising news in the source stack, however, is that Dwell Differently is actually ending its membership model in 2026.
That is a big shift for them.
It is. Because of this, they are running a massive final sale right now. We're talking 30% off all merchandise and 50% off their verse kits until May 15th.
The specific products they are prioritizing during this transition are very telling about their underlying philosophy. They are heavily pushing a $39.95 starter kit.
Yes, I saw that. The starter kit comes with a journal, a display stand, and a keychain.
It's all very physical, very present.
Exactly. The entire goal is to keep these memory verses ever present in your day-to-day routine. It is not just about reading a verse once in the morning and forgetting it. It is about physically wearing it on your skin so you see it when you wash your hands.
Or putting it on your keys.
Right. Putting it on your keys so you feel it when you start your car. Setting it on your desk so it's in your peripheral vision all day long.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound understanding of modern human behavior and psychology.
How so?
Whether it is a $1 million animated theatrical release from Focus on the Family or a temporary tattoo and a keychain from Dwell, differently, these organizations recognize a vital, undeniable truth. In an era of absolute information overload, values cannot just be spoken once.
They just get lost in the noise.
Exactly. They must be embedded into daily, memorable, tactile habits to survive. You cannot just tell a child a moral lesson anymore. The competition for their attention is too fierce.
So you make the movie instead.
You have to put it in a high-quality animated movie. You cannot just ask an adult to read a verse. You have to print it on a temporary tattoo so it interrupts their visual field 100 times a day. They are fighting a war for attention in a highly distracted world.
Wow. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We have looked at an incredible, almost dizzying diversity of sources. So I want to ask you, the listener, why does this matter to you? It's the ultimate question. Navigating life's heavy burdens, whether it is the immense, unspoken pressure of fatherhood, dealing with crippling daily stress that makes you want to lock yourself in a bathroom, or trying to raise kids with a solid set of values. It requires a blueprint.
And we've seen how vastly different those blueprints can be.
We really have. On one hand, you have clinical neuroscience, 45-minute autism screenings for adults, and hospital-run opioid recovery programs teaching emotional regulation. And on the other hand, you have calls for biblical brotherhood, stadium wake-up calls, and highly structured strategies for spiritual warfare.
And remember, knowledge is most valuable when it is understood and applied. Regardless of your personal background or which of these blueprints you personally lean toward in your own life, understanding these vastly different paradigms is crucial.
It builds empathy, right?
It does. It helps us recognize how our neighbors, our coworkers, and our family members might be processing their own struggles. When you understand that the person sitting in the cubicle next to you might be viewing their anger through the lens of an overactive amygdala, while the person on your other side views their identical struggle as a spiritual failing, It breeds a much deeper empathy.
It gives you a wider lens.
It gives you a sharper, more critical understanding of the complex world around us.
So what does this all mean?
It leaves us with a deeply provocative thought about the future. We have spent this time exploring highly spiritual frameworks on one side and highly clinical, biological frameworks on the other. But what happens in 10 or 20 years when the generation raised entirely on clinical brain mapping, autism screenings, and amygdala hijacks marries the generation raised on dwell differently's tactile scripture tattoos and spiritual warfare strategies?
Oh, wow.
When those two people inevitably try to build a life or raise children together, how will they communicate about their kids' struggles when they don't even share the same foundational vocabulary for human suffering?
That is a collision course.
Will they be able to translate between the language of the synapses and the language of the soul? Or are we heading toward a future where we simply cannot understand each other's pain? That is a question worth exploring on your own.
That is an incredibly powerful thought to end on, and a real challenge to how we communicate with the people we love. Thank you so much for joining us in this deep dive today. We love digging into this material, unpacking these huge ideas, and sharing them with you. Keep questioning, keep learning, and have a great rest of your day.